All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I would like to go ahead and have Kevin Hanemichael go ahead and kick it off.
All right, well, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the Overland Park Chamber's newest program, the OP Fireside Chat Series, a monthly virtual program where Chamber President and CEO Tracy Osborne-Olchin will host businesses and community leaders for personal, in-depth conversations about leadership and their views on relevant community issues. I'm excited to be part of this program on behalf of BHC Roads. BHC Roads is honored to be a partner with the Chamber as a series sponsor for OP Fireside Chats because I love the opportunity to learn from each other's leadership ideas and experiences. I would like to thank and recognize the Chamber's corporate partners, sponsors, and leadership circle members who invest in the Chamber's vision every day to make Overland Park prosper. Quick housekeeping item to note before we begin the program, all attendee audio has been muted to limit distraction and background noise. So let's get on with this part of the program. Dr. Bowne has an impressive bio, which can be found on the JCCC website. So rather than read it, I'd like to give my impression of Andy. As I think you will see during the program, he is very engaging and genuine, very easy to get to know. Dr. Bowne will be a really good fit in our business community. Andy has a long history in community college administration and leadership, but from a different perspective than you may expect. A large portion of his experience is leading non-credit continuing education. This relates to non-academic skills development and workforce development. There's been a lot of conversation about grooming our non-college bound workforce. Andy has spent a lot of time at a community college in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This gives him a lot of exposure to building workforce for manufacturing needs. He gets how business works and understands the business of delivering education. In Grand Rapids, he was put in a situation where he had 3 years to turn around the financial performance of a college, and he did it. He understands the importance of relationships. Part of his professional career includes running the foundation of a community college for 7 years. He understands the importance of trusting relationships to get people to give up money to feel good. Andy will build relationships in our community. He understands the importance and role of community colleges in regional economic development. He has experience meeting with site selectors as part of the economic development pursuits to show how the local education capacity can adapt and deliver the workforce that the community will need. And finally, Andy struck a chord with me when we were visiting. Andy was born in Kansas City, Missouri. He was adopted as an infant and moved with his family to Michigan at less than 6 months old. The common thread is that my son's adopted, which created a connection between us. Oh, and that my son successfully completed his first college class as a high school student at Johnson County Community College this summer. Had a great experience and it went fine. So I would like to welcome Dr. Andy Bowne home to the Kansas City region as your Johnson County Community College president, and welcome him and Tracy Osborne-Olchin, president and CEO of the Overland Park Chamber, to the virtual stage. Good afternoon, Tracy and Andy.
Good afternoon, Kevin. It's great to see you virtually, and thank you for providing such a great introduction to our first Fireside Chat series, and such a wonderful introduction of Dr. Bowne to the Overland Park Chamber. It's a wonderful day here. We thought about going outside to our new chamber fire pit and actually being fireside, but it is really hot outside, so we decided we would just be virtual instead. So it's wonderful to be here today with Dr. Bowne and with that great introduction with our Fireside Chat series. As Kevin noted, our goal with this is to really meet with community leaders and find out, behind the scenes, professionally, personally, a little bit more about you in a casual setting.
Sure.
And give you an opportunity to just say what's on your mind and your goals and aspirations. And, I don't think there's anyone who is a more new community leader than you are as our 6th president of the college.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and Kevin as well. Kevin and I had a nice conversation Monday afternoon. I bet we spent 45 minutes together on the phone, and it was great to get to know him and to get to know a bit more about his business in civil engineering. and now to spend time with you today, Tracy, and all of you who are watching us this afternoon. Thanks so much. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, we are just so excited to have you here and have you home. So one of the things I did not learn about you when we first met was that this is home. But one of the things I did learn was that, you're not a typical academic guy. And, you have kind of an unconventional route, to your college path. And I want to spend a little time talking about
Sure.
that. But, first, I always like to know what it was that you thought you'd be doing. What did you want to be, when you were a little boy? When you grew up, what did you dream about becoming?
I think when I was leaving high school, at least at that point, I was really thinking that maybe I'd like to be a teacher, but I wasn't really sure. And so I did the path that many students do of that makes parents cringe a little bit every time you mention the word of, I changed my major.
I did that a few times too.
Anyways, but I don't remember I suppose I had a lot of the traditional aspirations of, could a really not very talented baseball player who didn't make it, beyond Little League, so any thoughts of playing professional baseball, as much as that might be a fantasy of mine as a young child, reality sets in really fast. And so like all others that go to college, we make our careers in something other than athletics. So, yeah.
Well, so as you kind of made your way through, not through baseball, but through some of the non-traditional paths on the way to the college, presidency, give our audience a little idea of what that looked like.
Yeah. So my career straight out of college was as a resident director. So I was in charge of one of the residence halls at a small Christian liberal arts college in West Michigan, Calvin College, and did that for 3 years while I went to grad school. And so I was pursuing a degree that I felt provided options for me career-wise, knowing that what I really enjoyed about being a resident director was about community development, was about leadership development of the students that were RAs and other leadership roles in our residence hall. It was really the development of people that I most thoroughly enjoyed. And so I also pursued a master's degree while I was doing that. And so got a great exposure to holistic student development. So kind of balancing that college experience as well as thinking about what does education what does it look like, or training look like outside of the traditional academic setting, but think about it from a workforce perspective. And so for a number of years after leaving that resident director position, I had the opportunity to work in manufacturing for 3 different manufacturing companies. I worked for a die-cast company and was a nationally certified die-cast technician before they put the rule in that you also have to work on the job and not just pass the test. So I studied for the test and passed it so that we could create a training environment for our employees to really develop their skills as die-cast technicians. So I worked in die-cast industry. I worked in the spring making and wire forming industry. And then my last few years in manufacturing was in roll forming. And so I got a lot of exposure to how you develop skills, how you develop knowledge, how you develop capabilities in the workplace. And then layered on top of that, I spent 6 years in an economic development and chamber organization. And like you, I had the opportunity to do economic and business development work as a member-based organization. It was a great experience. So when you roll that all together, a lot of those pieces from my perspective, aligned to really being successful in a community college leadership role. And so in about 2000, I joined, it was actually 2003, I joined Grand Rapids Community College. And this is the story that Kevin was alluding to. I was hired to help turn the non-credit side of the college. So if you think of JCCC terms, continuing ed, that was the group that I led at Grand Rapids Community College. And we had a business model that was just costing the college way more than what made sense from a business model standpoint. And so I was given 3 years, turn it around, or you don't have a job, or worse yet, your team doesn't have a job. And I wasn't going to let that happen. And I knew the team wouldn't let that happen. And so we turned it around from a financial standpoint in just over a year. We almost made it in 1 year. But it took, second year it was firmly in place, and they've never had to look back because of the great team that was there. And then a few years in the foundation, and then they ended up really deciding that after mentoring from presidents that I worked with, that you really should think about a community college presidency. And so a number of years ago, we started developing me for this sort of opportunity. So.
Wow.
There you go.
Well, that's incredible. And so you really did, in a non-traditional sense, pursue what you thought you would be doing, which was teaching, teaching and developing, and helping people, from a very traditional community mindset, workforce, enabling people to have jobs and really pursue their dreams in a very large holistic sense. And so, I'm really interested in talking a little bit more about those mentors who encouraged you to probably pursue a path that might not have occurred to you.
Right.
Even as you were making your way, through one institution, different departments, did you think that, well, maybe I could run this whole place? Was that occurring to you at that time?
It started to. I was probably 2 to 3 years on the job, and Juan Oliveras, who was our president when I was the first few years I was at Grand Rapids Community College, Juan was kind of that first one to say, Andy, I see something in you. Let's start talking about what that might look like. And then that actually, part of the discussion led to the foundation work and trying to build a skill set that you need to be an effective community college leader. So Juan was the first one, and there were others along the way. So,
well, I think that speaks to everyone who is listening to this and reflecting on the importance of the mentors in our own lives,
for sure.
Who have helped guide us into a direction or a path that we either didn't consider or that maybe we didn't dare to seriously consider. And then who is in our path that we also have a responsibility to pass that on to, and just what we can do to assist them that will make a tremendous difference in their lives. And I want to explore that a little bit more, but I want to shift into the 90-day plan.
Yes.
So almost every leader, when they're coming into an organization, usually at least one of your interview questions along the way is about your 90-day plan and what you'll do. But not everyone has the opportunity to have a 90-day plan that is as fully promoted or executed as yours is. And so one of the things that struck me when I read through yours is this overarching theme of commitment. The commitment that you are making to the students, to the faculty, to the community, really it's commitment through all sectors. And so I want for you to talk a little bit about that and why you selected commitment as your theme and really what that looks like. I know you've already been there for a little while, but how that overplays, you say 90 days plus, because I think it never really stops. But just talking about that theme and what that means for the plan.
Yeah. So Tracy, when I think about commitment and the commitments we make to each other, the commitment in a relationship, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a relationship of someone in a formal leadership role and the faculty and staff of the college, but to the community, to our students. And so I've spent the last few years really focusing in on student success, and what that means, and the commitment that we have to make as an institution to help our students be successful. Our students, community college students in general, come to us, many of them fully prepared to be successful, others not so well prepared to be successful. And so our commitment to student success and for all students being successful really has to carry itself out in the sorts of services that we provide, in the commitment that when things are tough, when budgets are tough, when we're struggling through something, that at the end of the day, our commitment is first of all to our students and wanting them to be successful. I think in my experience, and I've seen other colleges do this really well, Odessa College in Odessa, Texas, talks about the commitments that they ask of their staff and of their faculty. They also ask commitments out of the students, because being a student isn't just about us imparting knowledge on you as a student, but it's bringing out the very best in our students. And so asking students, just like I would ask our faculty and staff in these early weeks of the semester, get to know your students by name. It's a little bit more difficult to do in this virtual environment. If we're in the classroom, there are simple things you can do. You can put name tags and, bring it to class every week. So when I look at you, I'm not like, oh, what student is this? I'm looking at you and I go, oh, Tracy. And so we can call students by name, but I also encourage our students to think about, get to know your faculty members. These are incredible people that are bringing their experience, their knowledge of both the teaching and learning process and their knowledge of the subject matter. These are experts. Get to know them. They're wonderful people. The more you develop that relationship, it's easier to ask for help when you need it and so forth. So it is about commitments, and the commitments that I make to you as a community. First of all, to say thank you. And let me just take a moment and say thank you. You as the taxpayers of Johnson County have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this place. We have an exemplary campus with exemplary faculty and staff. That has come about heavily because of the investment you've made in a fantastic college. So thank you so much for that. So, but my commitment to you as the residents and taxpayers of Johnson County, as business owners, as community leaders, is that we'll listen, and we'll listen well, and that we'll be responsive. And so the programs we offer will prepare students well for those that want to transfer onto our four-year schools, and to do that really successfully, but also to move into the workplace with you, and ensuring that our students who leave us have the skills they need to be successful on the job in your place of business or serving in our community, that they're well prepared to do that. So there are lots of commitments that I believe are central to being an exemplary community college, and frankly, of making relationships work.
Yeah, I think same commitments are probably those that would flow through, whether you're talking about the college or any business or nonprofit organization. And one of the other themes that I found was feedback. And, it goes hand in hand with what you just talked about, listening and, making the commitments a two-way street between students and faculty and the community, adding in that third leg. And so I want to talk about feedback a little bit, because I know that is really critical to
Yes.
you in previous conversations that we've had. You want to make sure that that's ongoing and formalized and really central, I think, to your presidency.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's something that is important to people who are listening within their own organizations. I think most people believe that it's important and something that we should all do, but sometimes it's the how, and that formalization is perhaps something that we can learn from. From you. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about your plans for making that a more formal process at the college.
So feedback happens in lots of different ways. So if we think about feedback from a broad standpoint, or more maybe for the college overall, and dig down a level deeper than that, programmatically, our programs have advisory committees made up of industry leaders of that programmatic area. So if it's our dental hygiene program, it's hygienists and dentists who employ and work with our graduates. If it's welding, it may be manufacturing. It could be in the construction industry. Each of our programs have a group of community and business leaders that wrap around that program and have the direct responsibility of providing feedback on our programs about what's working, what could work more effectively, what's happening in the industry to make sure that our programs are responsive. So that's one set of the feedback. As time progresses now, I will spend more and more time out in the community. Now, maybe it will be like we're doing it here by Zoom, but in very specific, listening very specifically to what, from your perspective, what do you love about the college? What do you wish we were doing that we're not doing? Are there things that we are doing that wish we weren't doing? So that I will be a piece of that feedback loop. Our board meetings, at the beginning of each board meeting, there's a section for open comment. That is a piece, an opportunity for feedback. And then within the college, there are a number of things that we're doing. So we held our first town hall meeting a week ago related to what we're calling return to campus, which is, so how are we going to do this delivery of education and service to students in a global pandemic? What does that look like? What does that mean for your department? And so what's working about that? And you need to be talking about that within your teams and tweaking how you provide service based on your experience and the experience of others to try and drive that very intentional feedback process. So, and I'm meeting with folks internally as well. One of the advantages, I suppose, is kind of a silver lining in this time, is that I would be much more out in the community than what I am right now. And so the silver lining is I'm getting to spend more time inside the college, getting to know faculty and staff and departments and what's working for them. And it's part of that ongoing feedback loop of, so how do we do this? How do we do education in a virtual environment in a way that our students can be successful?
Yeah. So. Yeah. There are a few advantages, not a lot of advantages to the time that we're in, but it does allow for some more internal introspection. One of the follow-up pieces to that is that we hear the priority of our members is talent. And so right now we have a lot of focus on the COVID piece, but overarching is that the need for talent doesn't go away.
That's right.
And the changes that take place in what we need from our workforce, sometimes can be extremely rapid.
Yes.
And one of the advantages of Johnson County Community College has been entrepreneurial approach always. And so talk a little bit about, as you know, the speed of advancement seems to get just more and more rapid over time.
Yeah.
How are you planning with your team to make sure that you are always responsive to the needs of business and engaging our employers, here and even more broadly throughout the metropolitan region to make sure that we are producing the workforce for the future that we need?
So I think there are a number of ways that we do that. One, I mentioned the programmatic advisory committees that are constantly providing that multiple times a year feedback information about what's going on and what are the changes going on. There's this new technology change in the workplace that is going to impact our programs. And well, if we talk about that in a dental hygiene program, the technology that may be available in a dental office. Well, to what extent are dental offices moving rapidly in that direction, or there are a few out there? So there is also that blend of leading edge. We probably won't be entirely bleeding edge, but leading edge. We're out towards that end of the curve. But there are also then practices that aren't moving as fast. And so if you think specifically about a dental program, or you think about a manufacturing environment where you may see a range of very high tech, latest and greatest technology, and others that are coming along at a different pace. I think of the spring industry where I worked in. There are lots of changes at that time going on in the spring industry, but there were still, in the 1990s, there was still manufacturing equipment that we had on the shop floor that were built in the 1930s and very functional and very reliable. So it's balancing that. Our continuing ed group on the non-credit side can move very rapidly and can design customized programs. When I think about that, it can be a leading process for determining the need over the long run of could this shift then to a credit-based or degree earning, certificate earning program versus a certification or some combination thereof. So we can prototype really quickly on the non-credit side of the college. When we talk about programs, there's a whole process you have to go through to get a program approved from a statewide standpoint. Is it a transfer program? Is it a CTE program that's more career focused? Is it going to be financial aid eligible? Well, if it's going to be financial aid eligible, you've got to get the U.S. Department of Education approving it for financial aid eligibility. So there are things that are outside of our control that can slow down a process. But overall, we are responsive. We will continue to be responsive and being able to prototype and launch more and more rapidly. At the same time, we have to balance that just as all of you would in your organizations in thinking through, is the scale there and is the scope of the work long enough so that we're not ramping up a huge investment for 10 students, and then once those 10 students are trained, we've got this huge investment that now is taking resources from doing something else. So there's a business analysis that has to happen with every program that we look at.
So given some of those challenges, the bureaucracy of it, versus also the scale of the need and needing to determine that scale, do you see a shift perhaps, at least in perhaps the short term, for more certification programs or more of that kind of on demand on the non-credit side, just so that we can more immediately meet the needs of businesses who are saying, I need this and I need it quickly?
Yeah. Yes. So when I talk to Karen Martley and others within the continuing ed CE team, if I say CE, it's continuing ed. being very responsive. Their business is strong. Kind of the general open access side of it, of sign up for this class or that class, is softened up a little bit, as you might suspect.
Sure.
But they've stayed pretty busy in being responsive to area employers. So when we think about, every year we serve about 45,000 students, 29,000 students on the credit side. Those are students that are looking to get an associate degree, a certificate. Many of them will transfer on, almost half will transfer on to a four-year partner to pursue a bachelor's degree. But when we think about the 45,000, if 29,000 are credit-seeking, degree-seeking students, there are about 16,000 students that are continuing ed students. And out of those, we had over 1,400 students earn an industry-recognized certification. So whether it's in IT, whether it's in welding, whether it's, think about the industry type, that's the short-term certification. That's the industry-recognized certification that allows them to go either progress in their career, go get a new job, get a job. I mean, it's part of our ramping that up. And I've seen where I came from, that was a huge push for us, was around industry certifications. And I see that happening more and more with us, both on the credit side, because you can build it into those programs, as well as on the continuing ed side.
So that progression kind of leads to this, to my next question. You and I talked the other day about Community College 3.0. So share with our audience, what that is, what the implications are for us as a community and for the future students of the college.
Sure. So Community College 3.0, when we think about, right, it's this 1.0, it's 2.0, it's 3.0, it's Industry 4.0. If we think about Community College 3.0, now we're into the Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah. That makes it sexier.
It does. Oh, now there are probably people that think I'm a droid anyway. So, so when we think about Community College 3.0, when community colleges were formed, and Johnson County Community College formed in 1969. Last year celebrated a 50th anniversary, major milestone. The bulk of the community colleges nationwide, and there are roughly 1,200 community and technical colleges nationwide. The 1960s was kind of the real growth spurt, if you will, for community colleges. At that point, and for many, many years, for decades, it was about access. So community college, if you want a 1.0, was about being an open access institution. That if you wanted to get an education, if you needed a fresh start, if you needed a restart, if you wanted to start first time education, whether you're thinking about adult student, traditional age student, community college, it was about open access. And thinking about, are we accessible for all students? So when we think about race, when we think about ethnicity, when we think about socioeconomic status, it was available to all students. So that was kind of the initial Community College 1.0. Then about 10 to 15 years ago, the shift really started to move towards student success. And so we started seeing more and more measures, and we see other states, not here, but other states, where performance funding is put in place. So they're measuring things like students' progression towards a degree, student retention. Did they stay or persist from one fall to the following fall? Graduation numbers, the number of graduates, the graduation rate, so the percent of students that start with us that finish. That really began the movement around student success. And starting to weave into that was the idea of, like would be an open access institution from a student success standpoint, are all students being successful? Within the last 2 years or so, the major shift in community colleges, the expansion of that role, is Community College 3.0. And this is now about post-completion success. So our students, when they leave us and they transfer to one of our transfer partners, could be KU, could be K-State, it could be UMKC. Those are our top three. Emporia State, Pittsburgh State, Mid-American Nazarene. You think about the schools that our students leave us and go to, how successful are they there? I dig down more deeply and look at program by program. So if I'm a student, I'm a business student, and I transfer from JCCC to KU and I'm studying business, how do I do? How are the faculty there? Are they pleased with our graduates? The data would show that students who leave community colleges and transfer to four-year partners typically do as well, if not better than, the students that started there as freshmen. So Johnson County Community College does a really good job of preparing students for transfer. But it ought to be that way for all students. And so the amount of data that we have, and we have some at the college, overall college level, and we see some by programmatic area. But what if we want to dig in and really talk about equitable student success? So does an African-American student have the same outcomes as a white student or a Latino student? I think we have to look at equity across that. And so that's really, when you think about post-completion success, is it equitable post-completion success, so that we're not leaving students behind when they leave us and transfer. The same is true on the workforce side, right? So our students that leave us and they go to work for you, are you happy with our graduates? Are you happy with, in general, all of our graduates? If an African-American graduate is working for you, are you pleased with that student? You want to see that equitable outcome across all groups of students, both in terms of the workplace and in terms of our transfer partnership. So that's really where we have to go as a community college. We've got work to do there. When I look at, one of the data points I looked at was graduation rates, and the graduation rates of students in the last few years, white students continue to progress upward nicely. Graduation rates increasing, where our African-American and Latino students, the Black and brown students, those curves are actually going in the opposite direction. And that, to me, is a problem we got to fix. And that's, again, where it goes back to the commitments that we talked about early on. How do you weave that together so that every student who walks in the front door and wants to go to our college will have the opportunity to graduate, walk across the stage and flip their tassel, regardless of their socioeconomic status, their race, and so forth.
So I would assume those kind of goals are things that we're going to discuss as you move into strategic planning process. Absolutely. And one of the things that we've talked about is our reliance upon and our insistence upon excellence. Mm-hmm. In Johnson County, we're just used to everything that we do and everything about who we are is wrapped up in excellence. Yeah. We're used to being on all the lists, mm-hmm. but at the same time, the fact that we're on all the lists is kind of a dangerous thing, because you can rely on that and you can forget about what's supposed to be around the corner. Yeah. And hard work is supposed to be around the mm-hmm. corner, so that you can remain on all the lists, and the lists that we don't even know are coming, just like Community College 3.0. That's right. It's about what the next standard mm-hmm. is. And if we have students that are not being as successful as they could be, then that's the next standard. Yeah. And the list that has yet to be called for mm-hmm. For us, we have to make sure that we can attain that. So, that is something that we hear from our employers. Mm-hmm. They have diversity, equity, and Absolutely. Inclusion goals, in their own workplaces, and so I think they're looking to, the chamber, to the college for assistance in reaching those goals. And if the college isn't successful, along with all of our other educational institutions, then our employers are not going to be successful in attaining those goals. And so, I think the work and not just your 90-day plan, but the strategic plan as it relates to those goals is going to be absolutely critical for us as a community.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the many things I'm excited about at JCCC is the amount of discussion that's taking place already around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I asked us to stretch our thinking a little bit as a college and asked us to think about diversity, equity, and belonging. I believe that that inclusion is critically important, right? Inclusion to me means I have a voice, my voice is valued. I think if you step it up a notch and think about that's important, what if I also felt that I belonged here for our students, for our faculty and staff, for you as community, that look, we are your college. Do you feel welcome and have the opportunity to engage with us as a college? That's all part of a sense of belonging that I think just takes the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work and just tweaks it up a notch. And again, really gets back to that sense of commitment. And what do we mean by it's not for the sake of counting numbers. It is about how do we move forward with intentionality.
Well, that is an excellent point. It's one of the questions that I was going to ask you. Our community vision for Overland Park was Forward OP, and we're now in the implementation phases. It was, halted just a little bit because of COVID coming on, but it had 3 major priorities: that we would be, as a community, forward thinking, we would be innovative, and we would be welcoming.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to ask you was, as a newcomer, albeit, one that came right in the middle of a pandemic and then immediately kind of went into seclusion in a hotel and in your office, what's your assessment of the community in terms of welcoming and of the college and the work that we have to do? And so that really strikes, I think, at the heart of your question, or of your response to the last question: what can we do as a community to be more welcoming so that people not only feel welcomed, but that they belong?
Yeah. So, it's a little early for me to have a lot of insight into that, especially given COVID and our inability to get in and out and spend a lot of time with folks. I think my family and I would say we feel very welcome here. There is an abundance of opportunity here. When I look at our student population and I look at the employees of the college, I see a welcoming, engaging community inside the college. Every indication in all of the homework we did, thinking through, is this where we want to be? And then now have the opportunity to be, that we're seeing much evidence of that it is a fantastic community. There's always room to get better. And when we think about, I know where I came from when I was in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids Community College and Johnson County Community College have some very strong similarities, both steeped in academic excellence, both important employer and workforce development relationships, a community that's very giving. And I just lost my train of thought.
Well, then we'll switch gears for a minute. I want to turn to a few personal things. So as you look back on your career leading up to coming here, or even on your personal life, is there a mulligan, maybe a moment where you'd like to just do that over again, go in a different direction, and take a different path?
So we played in the chamber golf outing last week.
That doesn't count.
Oh, that doesn't count? Because I could have used a mulligan.
Exactly.
In fact, I played with Chris Gerlach and Steve Wilkinson and Brian Biggs, and they didn't need a mulligan, but this guy, which would make our board chair, which I know he's not on the call today, Greg Musel, I'm very happy to know that his president is not spending a lot of time
That's
out
right.
on the golf course.
That's right. You're not very tan.
I am not very tan, that's for sure. Actually, I never am. So, anyways, a do-over in life. There are probably lots of them. I think I got one. When I left manufacturing and was recruited to look at Grand Rapids Community College, that gave my career a whole new start. And I loved working in manufacturing. I loved walking out on the shop floor. I could think of one of the programs I led was our new employee orientation. And at that point, we had about 1,500 employees. So it was a good sized manufacturing company. We were running orientation programs every month. And so 1 month a year, we were in a very intensive orientation program. And that was at a point in time when it was really difficult to find employees. And so you had folks entering, a manufacturing shop floor that had never been on one before. And you'd hear, oh, it's kind of loud in here, and oh, smell that. And what I tried to help them appreciate is every time that press came down and you heard that bang, or you heard a spray of a lubricant on into the die, that's the sound of money.
Right.
And that's what's paying for your paycheck and helping them get a sense of it. So there was something really special about being on the manufacturing floor that I thoroughly enjoyed. But I got a chance when I went to work for Grand Rapids Community College to rethink what my career looks like. And I didn't realize it at the time, but in over a few years, so let me go back. We talked about my mentor, one of my mentors. There were many. The first one was Juan Oliver, our president. And one day I went in to see him, because I remember I told you why I was hired and got to turn this part of the college around. I went to see him and I said, Juan, I know what you've hired me to do, but what is it that you expect of me? And without a moment's hesitation, he looked at me and he said, Andy, I want you to love this place as much as I do. That was a moment for me that I look back on with great fondness. And that was a turning point for me to really begin to think about not only the work that we're doing, but the commitment we're making to our students, the commitment that we're making to our community and the institution. And that was a big moment for me. So I think I'm sure if you were to talk to my wife, she'd say, well, there are some do-overs that, I probably ought to be talking about,
Well,
or my kids would,
that's
or
a
whatever.
whole different
That's a different
series.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Kevin wants to sponsor that one, but I'll talk to him about that later.
True lives of a college president.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that'd probably be it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, nothing real juicy there.
Well, no, and some people may not have any.
Yeah.
So if I called someone at the Indy Chamber or at Ivy Tech and said, just give me a few words and some insight into Andy's leadership style, what do you think they would say? From
a community standpoint, because I know folks did call and talk to the chamber folks at the Muncie, Delaware Chamber, where I was on the board. Jay Julian would say, Andy engaged more in the community faster than anybody I've met. He was deeply, so I am now describing me, very deeply committed to being involved in the community. And got to know the key players in the community very quickly. So, I mean, that's from a community standpoint, it's about engagement. And as your community college, it is reasonable to expect that we're going to be, and the college has been engaged in the community. So I think, certainly that is an aspect of my leadership style when you look within and outside of the college, that it is being actively present in the community. My leadership style, if you were to talk to folks inside the organization, would say that Andy's style is very much participative. Again, I don't think you get good feedback. I don't think you get the process improvement that we all need if you let the few folks at the top of the organization run it and expect everybody to do what you say. It has to be about active engagement and active leadership in a participative style. I think they'd say I'm a pretty good listener. That I see that as an important part of leading. The folks at Grand Rapids would say then when tough decisions had to be made, he was very participative in getting input, but at the end of the day, he owned the decision. And they would say who you see, who you're seeing here today is who you get.
And so is that the kind of advice you would give, if you're mentoring emerging leaders on the campus now, or if you're talking to some students who are trying to find their way,
Yes.
Relationship building seems to be the key, that you found early on. And if you're trying to advise them on how to be that kind of leader,
Yes.
engaging and participatory and listening, and they say, well, how?
Yeah.
How do I do that? What would you say to them?
So I think what I would say is you gotta listen really well, not just to what people are saying, but what they're not saying, what they're saying with their bodies, the nonverbal stuff that comes with communicating. So listen really well and find the people who you think, oh, I'd like to be like Tracy. I'd like to be like Kevin. I like something about how they lead. Get to know that person and get to understand how it is that they tick as a leader. We've done lots of these conversations over time about, how do you develop those skills? Well, look at people you'd like to emulate. I've mentioned Juan. There are things about Steve Ender, the next president I worked for, with Ann Mulder, who was an interim, that I learned a ton from. I can think back to my second job in manufacturing, the president I worked for there. I learned a ton in my mind about how not to lead. Fantastic lessons that we could talk about another day. But so watch, listen, ask for time. If you've got somebody you think I'd really like to be, you might think about asking that person, could I call you from time to time? Or maybe be even more bold. Would you take on somebody as a mentor? Would you, Tracy? Could we get together once a month, once every couple months for an hour? I won't light your phone up. I won't light your email up, but could we, and maybe it develops over time, maybe it doesn't. But those, I think, just being intentional about what you like in others and looking. And then I would also say, who are the folks that drive you up bonkers? And listen to them.
Yeah, and don't do that.
And then don't do that. Yeah. But I mean, I can think of folks that I've learned a ton from over my career that kind of might have been the anti-Andy or that,
Right.
And not necessarily they were against me or, and from anti in that, but I approach it in this way and they approach it in a very different way. What do you learn from that? And because we can learn a lot from others. You just have to figure out what you want to pull and what you say, you know what, you just mastered that skill. I'm going to pass on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So is there anything that as you kind of think back and, we've reflected a little bit,
Yeah.
that, would be that one little nugget of wisdom that you'd go back and tell the young Andy, here's going to be the key. You didn't have to learn that the hard way.
There have been a few of those. One comes from my brother-in-law, and he said, Andy, bad news never gets better with time. And I found that to be very true. That if there's something going on that your boss, that your, you know, in this case, if I had something going on that Greg Musel needed to know,
Right.
waiting, you know, until next month when we were going to sit down and talk, that's probably too late. And so, I mean, that was one of those lessons that has served, I think, served me pretty well in my career. There are lots of ways to solve problems. You should probably pick a methodology that works for you and hone that and get really good at that. I had that opportunity from Sue Elsperman. She was the president I worked for most recently at Ivy Tech. And we use the simplex methodology of creative problem solving. And it just created a really good framework, not only for problem solving, but for how we go about our work. And find folks who are different than you and get to understand them really well. Yeah, that was a Chris Arnold lesson.
Yeah. Good pieces of advice. And unfortunately, I think we're going to have to leave it there. I could probably keep you here for hours, and I know I would continue learning, and I think everyone in our audience would agree that they would as well. But I want to thank you so much for many things. One, for sitting down today and sharing a little bit of your life with us, but mostly for coming to Johnson County, taking a chance on us and taking the helm of the college. And I just want you to know how welcome you are to our community, and most importantly, that we want to be your partner. I think I've shared with you, the Chamber was founded just a couple of years before the college, and that one of our very first priorities as a board was that there should be a college, and that we wholeheartedly endorsed and worked for the passage of the bond issue that made the college possible. And so, you know, over the last 50 years, we've worked very hard to make sure that we were a good community partner. I pledge to you on behalf of our board that we will continue to do so. And so please let us know what we can do to help make the college successful as you move forward. And, you know, we want to make sure that we are as helpful as possible. So thank you very much for being here and for sharing your life with us.
Tracy, thanks so much. It was easy to say yes to come here.
Oh, well,
you know, it's a fantastic community, and my wife and I, in fact, we just closed on our house today.
congratulations.
So yay.
Yay.
Now we get the truck comes tomorrow, we can start unloading boxes, but this is home for us. And we're so excited to be here and to engage with you, our community. Thanks for investing in the college. Thanks for giving us a chance. And I look forward to being your partner.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and I'm going to turn it back to Kevin for a few closing comments. And Kevin, thank you for your sponsorship today.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job. Thank you, Tracy and Andy, for the in-depth conversation this afternoon, and to both of you for your leadership in your organizations and in the community. There's a lot of content here, something that hopefully everybody is able to grab onto in terms of some piece. So thank you to all who joined us this afternoon. And again, on behalf of BHC Roads, I'm delighted to partner with Overland Park Chamber as a sponsor of the OP Fireside series, and look forward to the future segments of this series. So with that, have a great rest of your afternoon, and we stand adjourned.